Okay, Stephen, here we are again at the Beaverbrook.
One of my favorites.
Yes, and we're looking at, before a couple years ago, we were looking at some of the same pictures down in the vault. Sutherland pictures, Graham Sutherland's studies basically for the infamous portrait that was destroyed after it was inaugurated in 1956. It was supposed to be permanently installed in Parliament, but ended up in a bonfire instead. Eh?
Yeah, Sutherland was probably my favorite artist when I was young. I know the Beaverbrook was the place I first discovered him when I was about 8 years old, and so I've seen these pictures all my life. They have a special place for me. I consider that Sutherland's approach to the studies that he made in preparation for his works were sometimes
better. Eh?
Well, sometimes better, but I'm not particularly sure in this case because we haven't got the final result to go by, do we?
No, just took photographs of it. But interestingly enough, you should say that about him being your favorite. He's one of my favorite artists too. When I was younger and living in England, he was one of the artists I saw at the National Gallery, the National Portrait Gallery, and the Tate Gallery. And he was my favorite British artist. So.
Well, Sutherland moved from his wartime abstraction to this type of realism, which owes an awful lot to direct observation.
Oh, absolutely. These are all direct.
I mean, if I can consider that there's an aesthetic background to what I do, and then it must be partly the result of observing the artists observing, which is what you see in these works. I mean, there's indications of working toward transference with the grid. I mean, that's you see that a lot of times it's a stylish affectation, but in this case, I know that he used them.
Oh, he used
because I've heard artists say that they don't use photographic projections because they distort the image.
Yeah. So. Well, he was actually working though. I mean, but a photograph of a painting that he actually did and then projected is different than using a photograph of the sitter. You know, I mean, it just.
Do I cheat? I do drawings and then photograph them and project the drawings.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I mean, but that's a photograph of a drawing that you're doing, but it's not a photo.
It's not a projection of a photograph.
There's
no one will mention it.
It's a reproduction of an observational work. But the thing that's just, I find, just the essence that he captures, and obviously when he painted Churchill, and you talked about the fact that he had a stroke during the sittings for the painting. He was a very old man at the time, in his 70s, and so am I.
But this has been after the famous Karsh photo or before?
Yeah, no, this is long after. The Karsh photo was done during World War II, like 1945, 44, done in Ottawa, when Churchill was in Ottawa for meetings. And these are, we were talking on the terms of realism and the fact that I guess Churchill didn't like this picture because it made him look old and infirm, which he was. And I was reading this morning in an article on Vanity Fair a couple of years ago, I guess it was last year, 2015, saying that she had destroyed other works of art, including a Sickert, you know, of Churchill. So she was an amateur art critic for sure.
I often wondered if there was an infringement of copyright, but I guess it isn't.
Well, he was not, you know, look at this one, he was not pleased, you know. What did he, I guess Sutherland called it vandalism, right? I mean,
there's an ethical dimension to that. I mean, I don't know exactly how far it goes. I mean, I've often thought that once one owns an artwork, you're entitled to it. But I mean, you are depriving others from.
Well, it was made for
because art is a public.
The painting was supposed to be in Parliament, and they gave it instead to him, which was a mistake, because it was public money raised to pay for the painting. It cost $1,000. Sutherland was paid in 1954 for the commission 1,000 guineas, which is 1,100 pounds.
Is there any indication of what Sutherland felt about the work?
Oh, he liked it.
He liked the work.
He thought it was great, and that's why he was so annoyed when it was destroyed. But he didn't find out it was destroyed till 1974. You know, so because it was supposed to be in Chequers, where Churchill lived, but evidently it was destroyed soon after it got to Checkers. They kept it in the basement, and the story is that she told her trusted gardener and handyman, I don't want to see that picture, and he took it out, drove it a few miles down the road, and burned it in a big bonfire. So she didn't do it, but she sort of suggested it, you know.
What a maverick.
Yeah, yeah.
So these sketches are basically sketches of a lost painting.
Yeah.
But this one's particularly
Yeah,
attractive.
you see, yeah, but that's a story too, because what I've understood is that's what he wanted for the official portrait, was that pose with his garter,
It's marvelous.
with the robes of the garter on,
Yeah.
and instead
He did a more...
he didn't wearing his parliamentary suit, his striped pants and black jacket, sitting in a chair, right? But what Churchill wanted was
more
to be with his, because he was very proud of being a Knight of the Garter, right? So that's what he wanted, and so he probably preferred this painting, you know. So, and you know, it was a lot of it was done through Beaverbrook himself, you know, who paid for a lot of this.
In their own right, these are good works.
Oh, they're amazing paintings.
I mean, they are. I mean, in terms of, well, I guess, overall impact, you know, and quality, I mean, I guess I prefer the two end ones. And
Yeah.
you can see that these are
This one, you
slightly
mean?
unfinished.
Yeah.
This one's a little bit undersized. It doesn't
Yeah,
really
and it's just a study, but
they're
you
just studies. They're not even composed.
But you could see, you know, the old master technique of the colored ground. You know, he's using a dark sienna kind of color here and a greenish color, which for you know, you put as an underpainting, and then you build on that. So the red tones and the
One of
blue
the
tones.
things one of the things you can't see in reproduction is the surface.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I really like about
It's the
these-
surface.
What I really is the dryness of the paint. There's no varnish. It's painted directly on a rough, almost unprimed canvas,
Exactly.
linen canvas. And in fact, now that I'm looking at these, and I've noticed it before, but I might as well note that I can see that Francis Bacon was
Exactly.
probably
That was going to be my
influenced
next
by,
remark.
You know,
Bacon was very fond of Sutherland,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Sutherland knew
Look at the
Bacon.
brushwork. I mean,
no,
it's-
no,
it's,
absolutely.
and the broad areas,
No,
the flat
I
color.
mean, absolutely, the influence, there was a direct influence between Sutherland to Bacon. They knew each other. They're different generations, of
Right.
course, because, what's he, born in 1903 or something?
Yeah,
But,
Bacon's in the 20s.
yeah, Bacon's in the 20s, and, you know, and Bacon was, you could see in Bacon's painting, I was just looking at one, it was Pope paintings the other day, you can really see the relationship between these paintings and some of Bacon's, and when you see the Bacon's in the flush, the surface is very much like this kind of surface, this dry scrub surface. Eh?
You know, in terms of technique, I mean, the bridge between, I guess, the level of graphic abstraction and degree of definition in the work comes through, even though there's not a lot of paint. I mean, most painters, when they want to go and voyage into an abstract realm, you find a lot more surface texture, depth of paint, and overpainting to make that effective. And these works are part of Bacon's mannerism anyway. I mean, Sutherland's mannerism anyway, in that he always painted very thinly.
Oh, yeah.
He used a lot of gouache. It was always directly painted on paper.
Yeah.
And so he's basically, there's a kind of a balance between graphic presentation and,
Yeah.
I guess, definition in the work.
Oh yeah, the other thing is, you know, obviously he's got a superb ability to draw because, you know, these are just paying off sketches and he's got it right, you know. He's not struggling with the drawing and the painting whatsoever.
I wonder what kind of relationship they had.
Oh, good, evidently, you know, et cetera. But my understanding is it was sort of a mutual admiration society, although, because he's painted many pictures, and although Churchill wasn't pleased, you know, this remarkable example of modern art, he said.
I've heard that Sutherland at the time was considered to be Britain's premier painter.
Oh, absolutely.
And Churchill would have been the most famous statesman.
Yeah, exactly. It's
So
a
there
good
was
combo.
a balance of power here.
And
wasn't there?
egos, likely. So,
wonder.
yeah, so, you know, it's...
And he was an amateur painter himself.
Oh, yeah.
Churchill.
So he knew something about painting.
Well, so did Hitler, I guess.
Yeah, but I think Hitler might have been the better painter.
It might have been,
Yeah,
the
but
war
they-
would have been solved if they'd had a paint off. Hitler
No,
and
I thought a
Churchill.
two-man show or
I
something.
think he was better.
If they had a two-man show, that would have been a better show.
Right.
But, you know, it is interesting. As I say, and the other painter that we were talking about just a minute ago, being another Churchill painting evidently destroyed, this Sickert, who I think, again, is a remarkable painter. And
Britain produced its share of top-notch painters.
Yeah. You know, again, the hand studies for the painting, of the non-existent painting, and again, it's great attention to detail. And once again, I'm reminded of Renaissance, both Northern and Italian Renaissance drawings, you know, and that the attention to detail and to understand how, you know, hands are a complicated thing to draw.
Hands are difficult.
You know, I normally leave them, when I was painting and drawing, I normally left them out.
Well, at one
you
time,
know,
you paid extra for it.
I know.
How many hands you had before?
Oh, no, I would think, I think the best way to draw hands is not to have them in the picture, you know. I think that's possibly the way to save things, because it is, you know, they are a complicated thing.
Are these drawn from life?
Oh, yeah. These are it says here, October, what's it say, October 1954, 8 to 5. But I don't know what that means.
What's remarkable is the sense of balance and concentration in these works. So, perhaps there are others that are discarded, but these really nail it.
Yeah.
And I guess he's looking for a characteristic position for Churchill's hand.
They're using the painting, because in the hand, in the picture that's destroyed, he's sitting in a chair, eh? So these would be on these are hands grasping the edge of a chair.
Here's a couple of eyes.
Yeah, up here, this is the same thing. It says gray, green, pale, side of eyes. So, I mean, you can see, again, that...
He's actually described what colors.
Yeah, exactly, right.
Rather than paint the color, he's described
the color. Yeah. I say, again, that thing I was talking about, Jan van Eyck's drawing of Vanderpeel, exactly the same thing, giving the color a little yellow, more yellow here, this, that, and the other thing, you know.
Does that really give a visual artist enough information to be able to go in the studio and work on a portrait away from the sitter? And,
I guess. I mean, obviously it did, but I mean, probably reading the text gave you a visual recall as well, eh? I mean, what other way are you going to do it? Because as I said,
memory is an important part.
Yeah, right. Because you know, now if you took a digital photograph, you'd have the photograph right to work from.
Well, I guess the issue is really how an artist internalizes the experience.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a photographer must have to internalize the experience to a degree in order to compose a good photograph, or is it just by luck?
No, it's a little bit of both, but again, the color in a photograph a lot of times depends on the color of light, you know, like whether it be like interior lighting like we have here, or daylight, artificial daylight bulbs, or, you know, whatever. And you can, you know, in cameras now, set the light balance so you get to, you know.
I love the indication of color in this one.
Oh yeah, isn't it nice? The blue.
Cool and warm.
Yeah, it's a hell of a.
Peach-colored paper, cream-colored paper, and a grayish.
Yeah.
Kind of an opaque chalk.
Yeah.
Push and pull, a sense of depth in the work. So
oh yeah,
way, you know,
it's the highlights. Yeah, the highlights are amazing, aren't they? It does give us a dimensionality to the painting that, or the drawing, or you want to call it, that you couldn't do without that white wash on top. It's pretty amazing work. Yeah.
Sutherland portrait by his former colleague and rival, Clement Attlee.
On behalf of both Houses of Parliament, Prime Minister, I ask you to accept this portrait.
When it came to the actual unveiling of the portrait, there was an audible gasp from the audience, and clearly it was quite a shock to my grandparents. And my grandfather, when he got up to reply, dealt with it in an absolutely brilliant manner.
The portrait is a remarkable example of modern art.
it was painted. It was very sad, in fact, that such a splendid occasion should have been upset by this reaction.
The portrait was later destroyed by Lady Churchill.